Welcome to David Game College Horizon Pods. In this podcast, we will look at the opportunity to retake your GCSE and GCE A levels. And with me today, I have John Dalton, the co-principal of David Game College. Welcome, John.
Hi, Theo. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. And let's look forward to going through this very systematically, because there's a lot to say and a lot to advise parents and students.
Indeed.
But John, the GCSE results and A-level results will soon be out, and a lot of the majority of the students will be very pleased that they've achieved entry to their first choice or insurance or through clearing. But as always, there are some disappointed students and who have not achieved either entry to their first choice through clearing and now wish to retake some of their subjects. Well, our listeners will be interested to then find out why, and would they take retakes, and what alternatives may they have, and is David Game College the choice for them?
The benefits of retaking your exams are various. I mean, the most obvious one is to get that opportunity to improve that grade. So you may have missed a university place. You may simply not have achieved the grade you wanted to, for example, at GCSE, and you may be disappointed. There's a whole raft of reasons for wanting to retake, but for A-level, the primary one is to improve the grades and to get into a university or indeed a job of your choice. And typically, you ask whether David Game College is the place for that. But I've been here over 30 years, and we've been doing retakes for that long. And I think it's a highly specialised area of education. Not all schools and colleges can do retakes. It's a highly specialised form of teaching, because you're concatenating down 2 years of material into one in most instances. And the weaving and sequencing of the curriculum is critical. And I think that teachers at this college are highly specialised, not just in the conventional 2-year A-level and GCSE courses, but also in the intensive retakes. So yes, I definitely believe the college has great capacity to improve grades. Typically, if you came in with a C grade, you may go up to an A grade in 1 year, typically a two points sort of, or 2 grade, not points, 2 grade improvement.
Yes.
So if you had a 4 or 5 at GCSE in 1 year, there's no reason why you couldn't go to a 6 or 7. And of course, I've seen instances where people have come in with a D and gone out with an A, or someone who's come in with a 3 at GCSE and has gone out with a 6 or 7. It can happen. It's all about the individual case, the background, the motivation, the energy. And of course, it's also the fact that sometimes there is another opportunity, and that is to change a subject. So you might retake 2 subjects. You might retake, for example, history and geography, and you might change, for example, at A-level, your 3rd subject, which you weren't doing very well in. It wasn't a subject that you should have been doing probably in the first place. Right. You didn't fall in love with it. So you may substitute in a new subject. Now, that can be very demanding, but it's also a great opportunity for somebody to rethink their educational career, where they're going, and sometimes introducing a new subject, although it's hard, can have amazing results. Somebody, for example, who's always been struggling with A-level maths and is constantly getting a D and E or sometimes a U, we would have to look very hard at that. And maybe they should drop maths and take up another subject. So there's lots of discussions around it, but there are lots of benefits to retaking your A-levels. And I've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of cases where a child's life has been transformed by this opportunity.
Mm. And tell me a little bit about, David Game College, because the environment here is completely different to a school environment. And what are the advantages then of actually being here at David Game College in a more international and domestic environment smaller teaching classes?
Well, you've identified a few already. We certainly generally have smaller classes, but I think the important thing is that if you're going to retake, we have people who are experienced at retakes, are subject specialists, extremely well qualified, extremely very good experience in their subjects, and they are skilled in being able to look at a student's performance and understand where there are gaps in their knowledge, where there are conceptual misunderstandings. And sometimes I've seen, many times I've seen young people come from other schools and colleges, perfectly good schools and colleges, no criticism of them because they all do their best like we do. But for whatever reason, that child's lack of knowledge in a certain area has simply not been identified.
Right. Mm.
And therefore, if they have a conceptual barrier in one area, it's very difficult for them to move on, especially in subjects which the prior knowledge is important for the knowledge which is yet to come.
Yes.
And their learning is affected. So I think the college, i.e. David Game College, is particularly adept and skilled at identifying where a student's gone wrong and making sure that those errors are not made again. And there's an awful lot of errors made in exam technique. Some schools are very good at teaching it, other schools are not so hot on it, and therefore you find that students are poor in relation to command words and don't understand simple instructions. At the end of the day, an exam is ultimately about following precise instructions. And you'll find a lot of students who simply haven't reflected on how they're answering a question and how they're interpreting it. So there's many, many ways and at many levels we can impact and make a difference.
Now, let's look at your subject, which is biology. How do you prepare a student for retaking in your subject area?
Well, the way I prepare a student for retake is not dissimilar to most other subjects because we have a system. The first thing you're going to do is make sure that the student has a copy of their specification. They understand what specification they're doing. And I would want to know, for example, if it's A level, I would want to know the background of that student. I'd be curious as to what their GCSE grades were. Have they had any breaks in their education? For example, there are certain key indicator subjects. For biology, I'd be interested in English, in particular in their mathematics result, because 10% roughly of an A-level biology has some mathematical components. So if they're weak in maths, i.e. not weak, I think that's the wrong word, but if they're not that strong and they've got a 4 or 5, which is a good grade, but it's not a super strong grade. If they've got a 7, 8 or 9, that's quite a strong grade. Well, it's a very strong grade, actually, if they've got a 9.
Of course.
And that gives me an indication of their mathematical ability, their potential. Doesn't always work out that way, but it's certainly... So I want to know what's going on in their maths and English and look at their general GCSE grades to see how well they've done, and then look at the context of that child's come through. And sometimes the context, gives you a lot of information about the fact that they've been moved from 4 or 5 schools. I mean, you need to take all this into consideration.
Absolutely.
And then I'd want to explore other aspects. So in the first few weeks, I want to make sure that I gave them some challenging homework and see, you start to emerge from them their strengths and weaknesses. You'd also make sure that you explain to the student how the curriculum is going to be taught, what we call the sequence. It's very important. The order and sequence of how you teach topics is, certainly in a subject such as mine, I think in many subjects this is true, it's imperative to their understanding. For example, in biology, I can't teach membranes unless I've taught the basic biochemistry of lipids. And I've seen biology teachers just do it the other way around.
Right.
And this causes confusion because you're using language like hydrophobic, hydrophilic, and other phraseologies, and you're making assumptions that students understand these things? Well, if they haven't done the basics biochemistry of lipids and understood their chemical structure and why they act as they do in relation to water, you're going to cause confusion. So it's very important to get that sequence right. Otherwise, you'll find that you'll have conceptual barriers. You'll want to make sure that the student has the right textbooks, access to the right resources. You would be looking in the first few weeks to see where the knowledge gaps are. You'll be picking that up from weak and strong signals, but particularly the strong signals would be from feedback from homework, how they're answering questions. Are they concise and cogent? Do they essentially have long-winded answers which do not really get to the point? Do they not use the correct phrases and terminology? Do they misunderstand the command words? We'd make sure that we would identify very early the major conceptual misunderstandings. It takes time, but you will get there. And you also get a sense of the student's motivation. Are they genuinely interested? Are they genuinely interested to have feedback? And this, do you need to sit down with that student and say, look, you've got a lot of potential. We do baseline tests, Alice and Yellis, and those results come out and they tell us the potential ability of these children against the national population. And if someone's got a very good Alice or Yellis test and they're not doing very well in my subject, there can be questions from me to that child, say, look, you've got a lot of potential. Why are you getting E's and D's? Motivation is key. Absolutely key. They've got to be hungry, and it's up to you to instill that into them, that intellectual curiosity.
Yeah.
And we would be looking at typically X number of hours a week face-to-face teaching. We'd be using PowerPoints. We'd be using lots of other ways of engaging with the students, lots of video learning, lots of visual learning, experimentation, where they're actually doing the experiments, so they're converting theory into real practice, and it's very important to make those connections. We'd be doing what we call assessment point tests roughly every 3 to 4 weeks, and then you build up a pattern of how well that student is doing and which topics cause them either to do well in a test or badly, and then you start to analyse that. You're constantly providing challenging homework, and you would encourage students to use AI as well to help them understand their topic. There's all sorts of ways in which you can do that.
Excellent. I'm sure that they would really benefit from coming to the college. I know that a lot of children at that age, they feel that there's a stigma when they fail a subject. And how should students cope with such psychological aspects of retaking?
That's a very important question. I think most human beings have a sense of failure, a fear of failure. I certainly know I did when I was doing my exams. It's perfectly normal. However, you cannot succeed without sometimes failing. And setbacks are there. And the whole point of a college like ours is not just to allow people who are very ambitious and clever to succeed, and they do, and they go on to Imperial or Oxford or UCL or whatever. That's great. But there are also people who just don't quite make a grade. You can't just ignore them. They have every right to have their dreams and get into the university and do what they want of their choice. And I think that's what we do. We allow people to have that second and third chance. So psychologically, when I interview people, I'm looking for, I know it's a bit of a buzz phrase at the moment, this growth mindset. I'm not quite sure. I think I know what it means, but as opposed to a fixed mindset. If you have a fixed mindset and you've got a C in a subject, well, it's going to be very difficult for you psychologically to convert that to a B or an A. But if you adopt a more open growth mindset and you are motivated and you're curious and you have some self-belief, then it's amazing what you can achieve. I remember many years ago having a student came in, lovely young man, had an E in biology. His dream was to go and work in conservation in Africa with rhinos and elephants. And I could see it was a genuine passion and dream, but he'd just gone off on the wrong path. And I sort of took him under my wing. He went out with a B in 1 year.
Very good. Very good.
And I remember him phoning me from Africa saying that he'd got his dream job. And you get moments like that and you think, wow. And you feel very proud, but it's not about what you feel, it's about what you can do for those kids. And I think colleges like this can make dreams come true. I think that's a very powerful message. If the child is willing and the teacher believes in that child and their potential, there's amazing things can happen. But you have to have what I would call a growth and a non-fixed mindset, and make it clear that having a second bite of the cherry, there should be no shame in that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
especially not after COVID and everything that's going on, all the pressures which are on people. It's perfectly normal to retake, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And John, I recall, if I go back to my days, I was very average in maths, just basically got through it. But I had a teacher for statistics, and I wasn't mathematically orientated, but he was just so good in teaching the subject, made it so interesting that the whole class was getting A's. And how important is it to select the right teachers?
Well, fundamental. You cannot have a successful college without successful teachers, and successful teachers are those who are not only good at the art of explanation, they ooze, they propagate enthusiasm.
Absolutely.
They bring in real-world examples. They make their subject relevant. And they take something complex and they have the ability to break it down and distill it into individual elements which the student can then absorb and assimilate and understand. That's a skill. It's not just, the art of explanation is not a definition. It is not an illustration. It is explaining something in a way using metaphors, similes, whatever it takes that a child understands, whereas before it may be that they had a teacher who really just sort of went quickly over that topic and missed out key things. Our teachers understand commonly where students misunderstand.
Absolutely.
And that's important, to have common. And one of the key features of a successful teacher is that that teacher understands in depth misunderstandings within their own subject.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting to hear. And I want to now look at the university sector, because some universities are prone to not like students who take retakes. What's your view on that?
Well, I think, to be fair, most universities, if not all universities, will consider retakes. It's the context. It's case by case. If you have extenuating circumstances, and they're genuine, and they're serious, I think many universities, including the top ones like Imperial, Oxford and Cambridge, will consider a retake. That is why it is critical to have somebody who is in charge of UCAS in a college, like we have Siobhan Flint, who can act as an interface in such a situation and put forward your case. There are certain subjects within universities. There are certain, for example, universities for medicine that just won't even consider retakes. That doesn't mean to say, however, that other subjects within those universities, I'm not going to name those universities, I think that'd be unfair, but who won't take retakes, but by and large they do. If, for example, you're trying to, I'm making this up now, but I think it's roughly true. If you apply to Imperial and you're made an offer AAA or A-star AA, and you end up with 3 E's, and then you say, I want to retake and apply to Imperial again, you can understand why Imperial might say, sorry, no. But, if you just missed 1A and something happened, there's a possibility you can retake. It's case by case, it's extenuating, but most universities will consider retakes. It's just that certain subjects are so highly competitive, they may not like you retaking unless you've got a very good reason.
Well, we're coming close to the end of the program, John, and what final advice would you like to give to parents and students who are considering to take retakes?
Do your homework, look at lots of colleges, see which one, visit them, very important to visit them, have interviews, and go to a college, such as ours, but to be serious, to go to the college where they feel most comfortable, where they have been convinced and persuaded and influenced that that college can realistically achieve what they're saying. Because it's very easy to say, oh yes, we'll get your son or daughter an A from a D. No problem, but give no indication of how that can be done. Whereas I'd much rather trust a college that says, we can convert that D to a B, and if it's a good day, maybe an A, and this is how we might do it, and this is what we'll need from you. Right. And it's going to be tough, and there's going to be hard knocks on the road, and I think that's really important. It's a contract in many ways. It's a contract. Absolutely. Not just in a legal sense, but it's a contract in understanding. Parental involvement is really important, certainly for under 18s. And if parents are supportive of that child, it's a massive difference, makes a massive difference. So I think to look at the colleges, see which one is a good fit for them, and look at what other students have achieved, look at their website, and do they have supporting packages? How much UCAS advice do they give? What's it like? Meet the head of UCAS. Meet the people behind the college, because it's ultimately those people that you can meet who are going to help convert that grade through your child and motivate them. It's important to understand that there are no more January retakes. There's only November retakes. At our college, for example, you can do most IGCSE retakes, and I think you can do maths and English at GCSE. So the January retakes are pretty much gone. So most of the retakes will be November or the following summer. Yes. November for many is just too near. It's too early. Yeah. Yes. So yes. Mm-hmm. That's an important one. And of course, you also have to consider the factor of coursework as well. So if you want to take across coursework, I think you have to check that and you make sure that it's in the same specification. But if you're doing a different specification on a retake, you'll probably have to do the coursework again, and that would be for things like English literature, history, music tech, computer science, and geography. Mm-hmm. So you do need to check details.
And John, when you actually interview a student, do you sometimes find that they may have chosen the wrong examination board for their subject area?
I don't think the exam boards are generally the problem, although there are certain subjects where, in my opinion, the exam questions are more straightforward and less tricky. Some exam board questions are very convoluted, some are more straightforward. So yes, there are there is mileage in choosing maybe some exam boards, but by and large they're very, very similar, and so they should be. But it's often not the exam board, it's the subject that they've chosen is more likely to be wrong than the exam board.
Well, John, thank you so much for this very informative podcast, which I'm sure many parents and students will be listening to. And to all our listeners, if you need any further information on this podcast, as well as all of the David Game College Horizon pods that we've had, you can find them at davidgamecollege.com.